What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 69, and the kind of clever working title of this episode is just episode 69, dude. Yes, obviously a little bit of a take on the famous Bill and Ted line there, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures. Yeah, why not? So, welcome to another episode. This week I was going to be joined by a special guest, Kieran Reid, but he's got personal matters to deal with, so we'll have to join Kieran Reid another week. We were going to be talking a little bit of Progress Wrestling. I know that he went to the Natural Progression series a couple of weekends ago, and still chasing the big event from Progress Wrestling from 2 Sundays ago, which with the highlighted main event was Walter versus David Starr, and of course David Starr won the Super Strong Star 16 tournament back a couple of months ago. I think it was around about May when he won that to face the Progress World Champion, and that was advertised as the main event. But we were going to be talking all about still chasing with Kieran, but obviously circumstances changed slightly. However, you've got me, a flying solo once again for the second week on the run, and we've got lots to talk about. We're going to be catching up with NXT UK, and a wonderful hour's worth of NXT UK action there. Can't wait to get stuck into that. Plenty to talk about from that episode, and the second 2-hour live NXT from Full Sail, hour 1 broadcast live on the USA Network as per last week, and hour 2 we had to flick the channel over to the WWE Network to catch hour 2. Both hours absolutely fantastic. Can't wait to get stuck into them. But of course, it's the final week where it will be split between hour 1 on USA, hour 2 on WWE Network, up until next Wednesday, the 2nd of October, which is a date that will go down in infamy, I'm sure, amongst wrestling fans and viewers and followers of professional wrestling, because the 2nd of October is going to be the date when AEW launched their new weekly TV show on TNT, their 2-hour Dynamite show, and it will be going head-to-head with NXT, our favourite wrestling show from the black and gold brand, of course, and both hours from next Wednesday will be showing on the USA Network, and it's only gone kind of hour 1 on USA and hour 2 on the WWE Network for the last couple of weeks, because the USA Network have had to fulfill their I think it was the final 2 episodes of Suits, the season finale of Suits this week on the USA Network, but now that's over, there's a 2-hour gap time slot for NXT to run both hours next week. So if you all listen to this in North America, then fantastic, you'll be able to catch it live on the USA Network, whereas as fans outside of North America or in the UK, we'll have to wait until the following day, Thursday, before we can catch it live on the WWE, or pre-recorded, but 24 hours after it's aired on USA, but on the WWE Network, unless of course you're able to find some cheeky streaming site to watch your beloved NXT on either live or sooner than it airs on the WWE Network 24 hours later. But we are here, so we're going to be covering all of that very, very soon. But first I want to throw out our plugs, as we do every single week. First of all, if you want to reach out to Wrestling with Johners on Twitter, you can do. Our Twitter handle is @withjohners_pod. That's @withjohners_pod. Go out and search for us on Instagram. Instagram.com/Wrestling with Johners, and of course I urge you all to go out and search for our ever popular, fun and interactive Facebook community page. Just go out and search Wrestling with Johners, and that's Johners spelled JOHNERS. And of course, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, please don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the podcast so that you know when a new episode drops. On social media, share and retweet so that you can tell your friends and family all about Wrestling with Johners and how much you enjoy listening to the podcast. So please shout about the Wrestling with Johners podcast. This is your only podcast for your weekly NXT and NXT UK needs. We do cover WWE, we do cover and review all of the WWE pay-per-views, and they'll be covering AEW Dynamite going forward. More about that later on in the show. and of course AEW pay-per-views, and the next one is in November, of course. So for all of your all-round wrestling needs, follow us on social media and listen to us on our podcast. So please spread the word, tell your friends and tell your family, and help to grow this podcast so that we can continue producing quality content for you lovely listeners each and every week. Did you hear? Did I tell you that Wrestling with Johners has merchandise? So please go to teespring.com/stores/Wrestling with Johners. That's teespring.com/stores/Wrestling with Johners to have a look at our full range of Wrestling with Johners merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, phone covers, whatever else we've got there. So please go out and check that out. Please, there is a wrestling podcast awards happening in December, and voting nominations are kind of open for votes for your favourite podcast. If you go to our Twitter page at @withjohners_pod or our Facebook community group Wrestling with Johners, it's pinned to the top of each of those pages. The information about the awards, the Wrestling Podcast Awards, the second annual Wrestling Podcast Awards, where you can click on the link, follow through to the Google Docs, where you can look at all the categories there, and put down Wrestling with Johners for all of the categories you think that we are worthy of being nominated for. But categories I'm particularly interested in being nominated for this podcast is Best Solo Podcast. Although we do have guest hosts most weeks, we are still a solo podcast. Best Newcomer as well, so put us down for that. Best Interview, I think we've done some good interviews this year, but the one that I'm particularly proud of is the Jimmy Corderas interview. And Best Branded, I do think between our efforts on social media with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and just the way that we like to promote the brand, get the brand out there with our merchandise as well, I do feel that we do deserve a little bit of a nod in the best branded category there as well. So like I say, we was going to talk to Kieran Reid about his experience with Progress Wrestling. I know that he's been going to quite a few Progress shows recently, in particular the shows from a couple of weeks ago, which culminated in Still Chasing. I think that was chapter 95, if I'm not mistaken, with so many fantastic matches, which included Mustache Mountain versus Keith Lee and Matt Riddle, Meiko Satomura versus Jordan Grace, of course, for the Progress Women's Championship. And the main event, it was advertised as Walter versus David Starr, the winner of the Super Strong Style 16 tournament from May, going up against Walter there for the Unified Progress World Championship. But we'll probably have to leave that to another day. The next time we have Kieran on, we'll talk about Progress. But it is available on demand. Just go to Progress's website or to their app, sign up to Progress on Demand. I know I do. It's money well spent, $7.99 per month, and you've got contributors, some other wrestling promotions from all over the world, including every single show that Progress has ever done from its inception back in 2012. So go out and catch and watch Still Chasing if you get the chance. But it's a shame that Kieran couldn't be with us today to cover that. But yes, let's have a look at NXT UK, because it was a really good show. And of course it was from the tapings that took place in Cardiff at the Motorpoint Arena the day after NXT UK Takeover Cardiff, the special super show, which I went to. I was very lucky to be there and saw an amazing night of wrestling, culminating in that fantastic main event, pitting Walter and Tyler Bate, of course, in that epic 42-minute match for the WWE United Kingdom Championship. But this is all part of the tapings, and the first match to kick us off this week was a fairly newcomer to the NXT UK roster, Oliver Carter. Now, I know he's been on NXT UK once before. I think it was in a bit of a losing effort to Joseph Connors, if I remember rightly. Here he goes up against Ligero. Now, we kind of know what to expect every time we see Ligero in a match on NXT UK, but here we saw Oliver Carter demonstrate a fair amount of agility and high-fly moves of his own in the early stages of this match, where usually Ligero is the one in charge, especially when it comes to the high-flying. Ligero gets the upper hand in this match, executing an impressive arm drag from the top rope. Carter gets a 2 count from a back heel kick and another 2 count from a lion salt. Ligero eventually gets the pinfall from his C4L springboard leaping DDT, which is always impressive to see. This was a really fun way to open this week's NXT UK, and a good win for Ligero, getting a bit of a winning streak behind him there. However, I've got to say I was really impressed with Oliver Carter. This was the better of the 2 matches I've seen Oliver Carter wrestle in since he debuted on NXT UK a few weeks ago against Joseph Connors, and that was a losing effort as well, I believe. But here, I wouldn't have been too surprised or disappointed had Oliver Carter have won, because I thought he was a fairly good match to Ligero and a good opponent, and put up a really good fight. But Ligero's experience and offense definitely won the match here. And can't wait to see a little bit more from Oliver Carter in the future. Definitely a bit of a bright future for him if he's handled well. Then we get a glimpse of Walter, the WWE UK champion, of course, paying a visit to the UK Performance Centre, showing some trainees a thing or two in the ring, with Walter chopping the holy hell out of some of the trainee wrestlers. I think one of the individuals appearing to be none other than the Do Not Resuscitate member Spike Trivet, or Trivet, however you want to pronounce it. But I'm pretty sure he was one of the ones that took an almighty chop and a bit of a mauling from Walter in the corner there. Then we get an appearance from former WWE UK champion Tyler Bate in the ring in Cardiff as he comes out to address his match, or to talk about his match with Walter at TakeOver Cardiff and his future within the NXT UK brand. He got a very warm welcome from his fans inside the Motorpoint Arena, as you would expect, and as he told the fans that TakeOver Cardiff proved to be one of the hardest, toughest nights of his career. He said that he felt that he had let his fans down, and as far from the NXT, as far as his future in NXT goes, he's far from finished, and there's a lot more fight left in the big strong boy. But before Tyler Bate could pretty much finish what he had to say, we get the music and the introduction of Jordan Devlin, who says that the whole world was impressed with Tyler's performance at TakeOver Cardiff, but Tyler didn't impress him. Jordan Devlin told Bate that he's the only man on the roster to give what it takes to beat Walter. He had a pretty epic match with Walter during WrestleMania weekends in New York, of course. Devlin explains that if he was to be in the main event of, if he was in the main event of TakeOver Cardiff, he would have been the WWE UK champion right now. And Devlin says that he is a man and that Tyler is just a boy. So Tyler Bate leaves the ring, walks up the aisle to confront Devlin. Devlin backpedals and goes backstage, possibly setting up a match between these two, and hopefully a feud between Tyler Bate and Jordan Devlin. And that is a match and a feud that I would love to see. Big fans of Tyler Bate, massive fans of Jordan Devlin on this podcast, and I think that those two would be an excellent match on a future episode of NXT UK. It's a shame that they don't have the NXT UK takeovers more frequently, because that could have been a fantastic match on that card. But it looks like we might well see Tyler Bate versus Jordan Devlin on an up and coming episode. I'm not entirely sure whether it was recorded in Cardiff during the Motorpoint tapings. It does look like we're going to be getting Jordan Devlin versus Tyler Bate fairly soon. Then we get a highlights package of Tegan Nox showing her road to recovery from the knee injury that she suffered around 12 months ago, and she is back to prove the NXT UK audience who Tegan Nox is. And if you don't already know, you will have the chance to find out as she takes on NXT UK Women's Champion Kaylee Ray on next week's NXT UK episode. That'll be one hell of a match. Our second match of the night is between Nina Samuels versus Dani Luna. So Dani Luna is a native of Cardiff, so she got a really, really fantastic reception. Definitely the hometown hero here. She goes up against Nina Samuels. This was a fairly competitive match with Dani Luna getting a fair bit of offense. There was one spot that looked particularly nasty though, with Luna appearing to drop Samuels on the back of her head from a botched suplex. It turned into a bit of a brainbuster spot. I don't think that was the intention. It did seem to rattle Nina Samuels just a little bit. Samuels struck back with a strong kick to the head of her opponent and a slingshot tornado splash for a 2 count. Luna is able to demonstrate her powerlifting background with a fall-away slam, sending Nina Samuels halfway across the ring. That was a quite impressive strength there from Luna. However, Samuels got the victory from a curtain call swinging net breaker for the 1-2-3. And as I said earlier, this was a pretty competitive match with Samuels eventually getting the victory. And I've warmed to Nina Samuels over the last few months, as you've probably heard me say a few times on the podcast before. I didn't quite like her character. It wasn't quite clicking with me, but I do like her character now. I think she's getting better in the ring, and she's definitely got heel persona pretty much nailed down now. So I don't think she's going to be getting anywhere near the NXT UK Women's Championship anytime soon. But I do think for the character that she portrays and the effort that she gives on the mic and in the ring, I definitely think she's worth a watch. It's then advertised that Isla Dawn will be going up against Piper Niven head-to-head next week's NXT UK episode with two of Scotland's finest toughing it out on our TV screens. And that will, of course, be next Thursday, because I announced during this week's episode of NXT UK that NXT UK will be moving from Wednesday to Thursdays on the WWE Network. So I'm guessing to avoid burnout of wrestling fans, basically, with so much wrestling taking place on the Wednesday, with of course NXT on the USA Network and AEW show Dynamite taking place on TNT. Although NXT UK would take place before those two shows, I think if the wrestling fans had a choice of watching Dynamite and NXT, and of course NXT UK before those two shows, they'd probably give NXT UK a miss, knowing that they've got 2 or possibly 4 hours of wrestling ahead of them with NXT and Dynamite, of course. And they're moving it to a Thursday so that it will possibly prevent wrestling fans from getting wrestling fatigue or burnout from too many wrestling shows being on the same night. And it makes sense to move NXT to Thursday on the WWE Network, because there's nothing officially on that time slot, or not too much wrestling congestion on Thursdays. Although NXT, having aired 24 hours earlier on the USA Network on Wednesdays, of course, will be replayed on the Thursday on the WWE Network. But you see what I'm trying to say there. Then on to our main event of NXT UK this week with Doam Dar, the Scottish Supernova. Supernova 11 taking on Moustache Mountain's very own Trent Seven. So this was a match between two veterans of the British mat game. And I know that Doam Dar is still only in his early to mid-20s, but he's been wrestling for better part of 10 years now on the UK scene, and he's wrestled for the last few years under the WWE umbrella after having competed in the Cruiserweight Classic in 2015, I think it was, joined the 205 Live roster around 2016, 2017, and he's been, apart from injuries which have kept him out for a number of months, he's been part of the NXT UK roster for most of this year. He's another wrestler that's really warmed to me. I've warmed to him. I'm sure if ever he met me, he'd warm to me as well. But this is also Trent Seven's first match on NXT UK for around 3 months since he fought and lost to Walter for the WWE United Kingdom Championship from the download tapings back in June and July. So Dar was vicious in his attack of Seven in the first 5 minutes of this match, but eventually Trent Seven gets his own back with a pretty wicked dragon suplex and a massive dive through the ropes, landing onto Dar on the outside. Trent misses a top rope manoeuvre. It was almost a bit of a phoenix splash, to be honest with you, but landed quite heavily without connecting to any part of Doam Dar on that move, and soon comes back with a wicked 7-star lariat for a very close near fall. However, that was a hell of a connection, but Dar kicked out on 2. Dar gets a close near fall of his own after a Lionheart pump kick and a clothesline to the back of the head of Trent Seven. And with Seven down on the canvas, Dar uses Seven's moustache mountain towel that he always brings to the ring with him to disrespectfully blow his nose into, wipe his armpits with, and then stuff down his trunks before going for his Nova Roller kick, only to be hit with another 7-star lariat from Trent Seven. And when Trent spotted his towel down Doam Dar's trunks, he loses his shit, quite frankly, and starts to beat down on Dar, with Dar holding onto the ropes, causing Trent to get disqualified after failing to break the referee's 5 count. So Doam Dar wins the match, all thanks to him stuffing Trent Seven's towel down his trunks. What a heelish thing to do, but nonetheless it led to a victory for the Scottish Supernova in what was an entertaining match to cap off this week's NXT UK. So this was a pretty... okay episode. It wasn't great. It was a good episode of NXT UK, giving us that promo pretty much to kick off the show from Tyler Bate, which led to a confrontation between him and Jordan Devlin, which is a match I'm definitely interested in if we get that soon, as well as a win for Ligero, a win for Nina Samuels in fairly competitive matches, all culminating in a decent main event match between Trent Seven and Doam Dar, which ended in strange circumstances, but was a strong match while it lasted. Let's move on to this week's NXT. Now, Hour 1, as it has done for this week and last week, aired live on the USA Network, and of course from next week, October the 2nd, both hours will be airing live on the USA Network. But Hour 1 this week, as it did last week, aired on the USA Network. And Hour 1 of this week's NXT, live and exclusive to the USA Network, starts with a shot of the Undisputed Era. The camera follows Kyle O'Reilly, Bobby Fish, both the current NXT Tag Champs, of course, current NXT Champion Adam Cole and the brand new North American Champion Roderick Strong, all up the steps as they take their seats to witness this week's episode. And I suppose they can all afford to do that now that they're all the champs and finally fulfilling the Undisputed Prophecy. Then we have a really hot opening match, and I think that this is the third time that these two have met, at least on the NXT brand. I know they've wrestled many times for PWG in America and across the Indies, around America, of course. But Keith Lee and Dominik Dijakovic, with their first match going to a no contest with a double count out. Their most recent match, which took place a few weeks ago, ended with Dominik Dijakovic winning in what was deemed a bit of a match of the year contender at the time. But this week's match, given a big stage, a big platform on the USA Network, of course, to kick off this week's show. We know what these two can do. Two huge men who can move around the ring as well as any cruiserweight. But this match is their first match on a network TV show. So I'm expecting these two to pull out even more of the stops if that is even possible. The crowd are definitely up for this one, even before the bell rings. Neither of these two have ever been on a takeover. We all know that. But when they get it going, these two are good enough to headline not just the takeover, but pay-per-views, let's be honest. Keith Lee wows the audience with a leapfrog and a running crossbody, followed by a gigantic pounce, sending Dijakovic clean over the top rope and onto the ring apron on the outside. But as each man battle it out on the ring apron, Dijakovic somehow manages to chokeslam Keith Lee down hard onto the ring apron. What a great move, and a really big move down a big man. Then we, with the move that the fans out of their seats, literally out of their seats, we saw Keith Lee execute a corkscrew tope onto Dijakovic from the inside of the ring all the way to the outside of the ring onto Dijakovic. One hell of a move there. There's a close near fall from a huge moonsault from the 6'3", 340 Keith Lee. So how a man as big as him can be as agile as he is will always baffle me, but it looked absolutely amazing. Then in one of the moves of the night, possibly move of the week, or hell, I'd even go as far as to say that this could be in highlight reels for many years to come. Dijakovic hits Keith Lee with a super Canadian destroyer from the middle turnbuckle. Well, Keith Lee was on the middle turnbuckle when the move was executed. Dijakovic was standing on the top turnbuckle. However, even that only got a 2 count. What a really, really impressive move. And at this stage, the fans are on their feet, giving these two wrestlers everything. And even Mauro Ranallo is going mental at the commentary desk. How the hell did Keith Lee manage to kick out of that move? I'll never know. Keith Lee recovers, however, from a moonsault from Dijakovic, simply picking up his opponent, hoisting him onto his shoulders before dropping Dijakovic down hard with a massive power slam off of his shoulders for the pinfall victory. So that was another really impressive match between these two, as you would expect, and they certainly didn't let the fans down in attendance or the viewing audience on the USA Network. And it's a match that maintained the standards that they've given us to us previously in the previous two matches, and I believe that this match could potentially elevate, or deserves to elevate, these two individuals to bigger and better things in the future. However, I do think that now that Keith Lee has evened the scores with Dijakovic winning the match a few weeks ago, Keith Lee winning this one, it's one apiece. I do think that it's not over between these two, and that there is going to be a rubber match, whether that is going to be on the next takeover, which I think is going to be War Games in October, or possibly another live NXT on the USA Network. There definitely has to be that final match where we can decide who's going to win 2-1 in this fantastic feud that's captured everybody's imagination and has really got everybody on the edge of their seats, or possibly standing up in attendance and at home. I know I was shouting at the TV when I was watching this one. Hell of a match. Two brilliant wrestlers. Out of the two, though, I've got to be honest, I do think that Keith Lee has the brighter future. I think he's got the personality. I think he's got the charisma. I think he's got the mic skills as well as the wrestling ability. And, I know that we've said this before. WWE, they really pride themselves on having big wrestlers. But has there been many big wrestlers of the calibre of Keith Lee that can be big, charismatic, great on the mic, but can wrestle as well? And he can wrestle. And like I said at the beginning of my commentary between these for this match, they can do stuff that cruiserweights can do. There's definitely a place on the main roster, or on a bigger scene potentially for Dijakovic. I definitely think that there's a bright future for Keith Lee in NXT and the WWE Raw or SmackDown in the future. I firmly believe that, but definitely I'm looking forward to another match between these two to see who comes out on top. We're still within hour one, remember, of NXT on the USA Network, and the next match was Tainara, formerly Tainara Conte. She's obviously gone through the name shortening machine. She's just Tainara now, going up against Dakota Kai. So Dakota Kai's been out for quite a few months. I think it was mentioned on last week's NXT. She's been out for about 9 months now after tearing her ACL, so she's recovering from a torn ACL injury. With this being her comeback match live on the USA Network, we see some of Tainara's kicking ability in the early stages of this match, if I can get my words out. However, Dakota Kai soon reminds us why she's the captain of Team Kick, eventually putting the match to bed from a face wash kick in the corner, followed by an impressive GTK. So she hooks the leg of her opponent, gets to 1-2-3. Welcome back, Dakota Kai. And she will be an exciting addition to an already awesome NXT women's roster on the NXT brand, which seems to be growing and getting better and more fearsome every single week. And of course, with the recent addition of Rhea Ripley and rumours that Toni Storm's going to be on the NXT roster, moving from the NXT UK roster very soon, that definitely interesting and exciting things there for Dakota Kai and her future within the NXT women's roster. And with the announcement of Candice LeRae getting her shot at Shayna Baszler's championship gold next week on the first full 2-hour show on the USA Network, following her amazing win in that incredible 4-way match last week, I know for sure that the women's division on NXT is heading in the right direction. It always was in the right direction, but a little bit of a thought from me on that match next week between Shayna and Candice. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'll mention a bit later on, but there's going to be 3 big titles, 3 big NXT championships on the line in next week's 2-hour show, going head-to-head with AEW's Dynamite show, of course, next Wednesday. And I think that this could be the championship that could change hands. It wouldn't surprise me if Candice LeRae takes the belt, and I know we've said this about every opponent that Shayna's faced since she regained the title from Kairi Sane. When was it now? Was it earlier this year, late last year? So she's held the championship combined for probably well over a year from her first and her second reign, but the second reign seems to have gone on for a long time now, I think it was possibly NXT Phoenix in January when she regained the championship over Kairi Sane, if I'm not mistaken. So she's held the championship now for 9 months. So a brilliant second reign from Shayna Baszler. But I'm kind of laying my cards on the table here, and I'm going to say that Candice LeRae beats Shayna Baszler for the NXT Women's Championship next week, only because I've got this sneaking suspicion that with SmackDown going to Fox on Friday, 2 days later, on the 4th of October, I think that could be a platform for Shayna Baszler, and it wouldn't surprise me if Shayna actually appears on that Fox premiere on the 4th of October. And possibly leaving Candice as the NXT Women's Champion, moving Shayna on to kind of bigger and better things on the Fox network, and leaving Candice as the champion, but possibly furthering her feud with Io Shirai, where Shirai can chase the title and potentially, go into a bit of a feud with Candice, or continue a feud with Candice with the NXT Women's Championship belt on the line. So interesting things. We'll have to see what happens next Wednesday, and if I've said happens actually comes true, then potentially we could be seeing Shayna go up onto the main roster or SmackDown in time for the Fox premiere of SmackDown on the Friday. But exciting things. I'll definitely be tuning into both shows next week to see what happens there. Then we're on to our main event of hour one, and this is Matt Riddle versus Killian Dain, and this is their street fight rematch from last week. So you may remember that Dain and Riddle closed the first ever 2-hour NXT from last week that ended with an all-out brawl involving the rest of the NXT locker room, pretty much anyway, with a rematch being announced for this week's show to close out the first hour of NXT on the USA Network. But this time they have something on the line with William Regal adding an incentive, a bit of a stipulation, if you will, for the winner of this match. The winner will be getting a title shot against current NXT champion Adam Cole in the main event of next week's NXT. And that will be an awesome main event with NXT going head-to-head, of course, with AEW. So in this match, Dain connects with a couple of kendo stick shots on the outside, so straight away they're going after the weapons. Riddle hits 2 Brotons, getting the first 2 count of the match. Dain hits a powerbomb and an elbow drop for a 2 count of his own. There's an Alabama slam and a floating bro from Riddle. Dain connects with a huge dive through the ropes onto Riddle on the outside, and the match goes into the arena, similar to the way it progressed last week, with stiff kicks and chair shots, all before Dain hits a running crossbody, sending himself and the original bro Matt Riddle through a plasterboard wall that looked like it just been freshly painted as well, so specially designed for that spot, no doubt. There's a Broton through a table on the outside in the arena. The match does eventually get back into the ring, where Dain delivers 3 massive Vader bombs before getting a very close near fall. Dain even places a chair across Matt Riddle's chest before attempting another Vader bomb, using the chair as a weapon, but Riddle manages to avoid the Vader bomb before delivering a knee strike through the chair, hitting Dain square in the face. The match comes to an end after Matt Riddle places Dain in a punishing Fujiwara armbar for the victory, and now with a chance to go on to face Adam Cole next week with the NXT title on the line in what will surely be the main event of that show next week, which will be going head-to-head with AEW's new show Dynamite, of course, but with Matt Riddle still recovering inside the ring after his victory over Killian Dain. The aforementioned NXT champion Adam Cole came into the ring alone at this point to try to put Matt Riddle in his place with a bit of a verbal slanging match, trying to browbeat Matt Riddle, you could say, only for the number 1 contender to slap on the Fujiwara again, this time onto the champ, before the rest of the Undisputed Era rushed to Cole's aid before Riddle was out of there, bringing an end to the first hour of this week's NXT. So, really good match between Matt Riddle, Killian Dain. I think we've had a lot of brawls from Killian Dain and Matt Riddle in the past. matches that have gone to a non-finish. Last week was one of those. It involved, as I described it, an all-out brawl involving other members of the NXT locker room getting involved. This match was much better than any of their previous confrontations. A, because there was no other wrestlers involved, and B, because we actually had a conclusion. We actually had a win. We actually had a decisive win as well, with Matt Riddle making Killian Dain tap out to his Fujiwara armbar. But really good match, and we'll talk more about this match a bit later on when I compare hour 1 to hour 2, because I have my thoughts on that. But a great match to cap off the hour 1 on the USA Network, before we all had to grab our remote controls or our phones or our devices and flick over to the WWE Network for hour 2, which kicked off with a match. And I mentioned earlier how the NXT Women's roster was in a really healthy place, and with a recent move from NXT UK to the NXT roster, former WWE or NXT Women's Champion, UK champion Rhea Ripley, going up against Kaden Carter. So we're all huge fans of Rhea Ripley on this podcast. You all know that. She didn't disappoint here either, coming out of the gate with a stunning drop kick, taking her opponent down for a 2 count. Ripley executes a huge delayed vertical suplex. Brings back memories of Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, whenever I see the delayed vertical suplex. Gets another 2 count there before laying in a series of solid punches to Carter's head. Carter gets her own back, gets a little bit of offense from an impressive Hurricane Rana, a Quesadora, and a back kick for a 2 count of her own. However, the match didn't go too much longer before Ripley hit a riptide pump handle powerbomb for the relatively easy 3 count and win. So, a good win there for Rhea Ripley. Then we get another match, Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch versus Ever Rise. I think that was how they were described. We've seen these two individuals, Parker and Martel, a few weeks ago. Don't ask me to remember who they fought, but we have seen these two before, and they were quite surprising. Parker and Martel had quite a bit of offense in this one, turn it into a competitive match, or more of a competitive match than it should have been, in my opinion, over Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan, who are pretty no-nonsense, strong-style, hard-hitting wrestlers. We've seen them lay waste to opponents of a better calibre than Parker and Martel in the past, but obviously making it competitive with it being a live match on the WWE Network. Parker and Martel even get close near fall on Danny Burch from a running knee to the side of the head of Oney Lorcan. As a matter of fact, Burch and Lorcan eventually get all fired up and all hulked up before hitting an assisted implant DDT for the win. Then the next match features Cameron Grimes versus Raul Mendoza. I think we saw these two on last week's live NXT. Cameron Grimes laying waste to his opponent, Sean Maluda, in about 6 seconds. He pretty much whitewashed Sean Maluda, just one match straight out of the gate with his double foot stomp, of course. Mendoza looked great in this match. I think he went up against Pete Dunne, if I'm not mistaken, on last week's NXT. And Mendoza here looked great in this match, demonstrating his usual high-flying prowess. Grimes turned an attempted crossbody into a running moonsault, a Spanish fly. We've seen that from Grimes before, gets a 2 count. Mendoza hits Grimes with a running step-up enziguri that sent Grimes flying, followed by a springboard Hurricane Rana. But before Mendoza could capitalise, Grimes strikes from out of nowhere with a double foot stomp to the chest for the 1-2-3. So his patented finisher putting an end to this match and an end to Raul Mendoza. This was a really fun match, fast-paced match with Mendoza putting in a great showing here again. But there was only ever going to be one winner at the end of the day, and that one was one of the most exciting up-and-coming superstars on the NXT roster, Cameron Grimes. So he's been on the live NXT 2 weeks running, so they've obviously got a thing for Cameron Grimes. I think that Triple H and William Regal and the others backstage are definitely high on Cameron Grimes, and I think he's definitely one to watch. Then we get confirmation that the main event of next week's NXT on the USA Network will indeed be Adam Cole, not Carol Ole or whatever I was about to call him. Adam Cole, baby, defended the NXT Championship against Matt Riddle But that is not all. It is going to be the NXT Night of Champions of sorts, as we'll be getting the Undisputed Era defending their NXT tag titles against former champions, the Street Profits. So Street Profits making their return to Full Sail for next week's big head-to-head show. NXT against AEW's Dynamite. Of course, they're bringing out the big guns and bringing back the Street Profits for kind of a rematch against Undisputed Era. As well as Shayna Baszler, the NXT Women's Champion, putting her NXT Championship on the line against the winner of last week's excellent Fatal 4-Way, Candice LeRae, of course. So NXT definitely stacking the deck in their first head-to-head show, going up against AEW's Dynamite next Wednesday. Then the main event of hour 2 of this week's NXT, Kushida is going up against Imperium. So Imperium is going to be Fabian Eichner, Marcel Bartel and Alexander Walter. Now I believe that it was after Kushida's confrontation with Walter and Imperium last week that Walter sent out a challenge to Kushida to find for him to find 2 other partners to take on Bartel, Eichner and Wolf on this week's main event. But who will Kushida's partners be? So after Imperium made their entrance, we find out that it is going to be the Fashion Police, Fandango and Tyler Breeze, otherwise known as Breezango. So no Walter in this match, but Bartel nails Breeze with a running spinning forearm uppercut on the outside, sending Tyler Breeze flying. There's a spot where Breeze was tied upside down in Imperium's corner, allowing Bartel and Eichner to deliver stereo drop kicks. There's a good few minutes where Breeze is caught in Imperium's corner, with each member of the NXT UK faction Imperium taking the turns to beat down on the Prince Pretty in their corner. Fandango eventually gets the hot tag to clean house, and Dango nails a perfect tope con hero as Kushida applies an armbar to Bartel. Kushida connects with a handspring double heel kick before rolling up Bartel for the pinfall victory. So that was a really fun and entertaining match. But for Kushida, the celebration didn't last long as Walter comes from the back to strike Kushida from behind on the rampway, with all 4 members of Imperium standing tall, standing in line as they do, as their music played to bring an end to this week's 2-hour episode. So does Kushida and Walter do anything for me? Hell yes, it does. I can't wait for them to finally have a match on NXT. That will definitely headline a future episode, no doubt. So, good match. I was a little bit surprised to see Breezango, the Fashion Police, in here in this main event. But I think that marked the difference between hour 1 and hour 2, as I kind of briefly alluded to earlier on, where I thought that because the first hour was on the USA Network, it was the stronger of the 2 hours in my opinion. Now people might disagree with that, but you look at the matches, you had Keith Lee versus Dominik Dijakovic, you had the main event pitting between Matt Riddle, of course, and Killian Dain in that awesome street fight. So 2 brilliant matches in that first hour on the USA Network. Now if hour 1 and hour 2 was switched, and having Breezango and Kushida going up against Imperium to headline hour 1, and having Matt Riddle and Killian Dain and Keith Lee versus Dijakovic in hour 2, I think that would have been the better way round. But of course, obviously NXT were stacking the card for hour 1 to please to kind of pleasure the USA Network to keep them happy, so I can understand why they did that. And I just felt that hour 2 wasn't as strong, but it was an entertaining match nonetheless. Kushida definitely is being highlighted quite heavily and pushed quite heavily on NXT. Great to see Imperium and Walter especially on the NXT brand. There were rumours going around that Walter, in fact I even heard Walter on a Steve Austin podcast probably going back a year or so ago, saying that he wasn't keen on living in America or travelling abroad or going outside or wrestling too much outside of Europe, but it sounds like he's changed his mind on that because he's been on NXT 2 weeks running. over in Florida, of course. So I don't know whether this is going to be a long-term thing for Walter and Imperium, but it looks like they're going to be kind of the main faction, or one of the main factions, on both NXT UK and NXT, and long may that continue. As far as I'm concerned, all the potential dream matches, certainly on NXT, is making me kind of getting excited for what the possibilities could be, especially with War Games around the corner. Maybe seeing Undisputed Era versus Imperium inside a War Games cage. That would be pretty good, but definitely looks like we're going to have Walter versus Kushida on an up-and-coming episode of NXT very, very soon, and that will be a match of contrasting styles, but I think Walter's best matches, to be honest with you, are always when he's up against the smaller opponents, and I think there's no better, in my opinion, to go up against Walter than Kushida. And Kushida hasn't really had that kind of headline feud, hasn't really had that standout match yet, and I think they're setting him up to have that headline feud and standout match against Walter very, very soon. I think the build, certainly in the last couple of weeks, has been pretty exciting with Kushida. Yeah, he kind of got the upper hand in a brief confrontation with Imperium and Walter last week. He was left laying at the end of this episode, though, with Walter standing tall as the little copyright symbol came on screen, the bottom right-hand corner, and Imperium standing tall over Kushida on the rampway. So we'll probably see and hear more from Kushida and Imperium on next week's episode, possibly leading to a match on October the 9th. That will be fun. But yeah, overall thoughts, I thought it was a really good, strong episode. I loved Keith Lee and Dominik Dijakovic. They haven't let me down once. I think all of their matches, whether it be the double count out from several months ago to their match where Dijakovic won a few weeks ago, to this week's win for Keith Lee, has been stellar. Absolutely fantastic. And I think that the viewing audience, both at Full Sail and at home, has got their money's worth from these two, most definitely. Really enjoyed Matt Riddle versus Killian Dain. Like I say, it was nice to have a payoff finally and a clean finish, and a little bit of drama with Adam Cole getting put in the Fujiwara armbar from Matt Riddle, setting up their championship match on NXT Clash of Champions next Wednesday. That's not what they're calling it, that's what I'm calling it, because you've got the NXT tag titles on the line. Undisputed versus Street Profits. You've got the Women's Championship on the line, Shayna Baszler versus Candice LeRae, and you've got Adam Cole defended his NXT Championship against Matt Riddle, of course. Another strong 2 hours, and I think next week is going to be stacked as well. They're definitely going to be pulling out all the stops, especially with those championship matches as they go head-to-head for the first time with AEW and their premiere on TNT Dynamite. So that pretty much draws an end to this week's episode of Wrestling with John. There's no guests, no Kieran, unfortunately, and no talk about progress, but no doubt we'll get Kieran on a future episode to update us on his wrestling fandom, his journeys around the UK to catch up with independent wrestling and progress. But join us again next Saturday. So in about a week's time, we'll actually be dropping 2 episodes. We'll be recording 2 episodes of the Wrestling with Jonas podcast. Yes. So firstly, I'll be joined by Chris Thornton and Ash Crawford, where we'll be talking about the premiere episode of AEW Dynamite from Wednesday the 2nd. We'll be recording that on Saturday the 5th, and it'll be dropping that same day. So join Chris, Ash and myself will be talking about AEW Dynamite on an exclusive episode to cover the first 2-hour episode of 2-hour show on TNT. That same day, I'll be squeezing in a recording with David Anderson, long-time friend of the show, been on many episodes of Wrestling with John as a guest host in the past. We'll cover next week's NXT, 2-hour episode, to see how they fare when they go head to head with a Dynamite. So you'll have 2 podcasts to see how AEW fare with their premiere episode of Dynamite, and how NXT fare with all of their championship matches when that's going to be covered by myself and David Anderson. We're also going to be looking at the season premiere, the first ever SmackDown, going live on Fox on Friday the 4th of October. And that's going to be headlined by a WWE Championship match, Brock Lesnar versus Kofi Kingston. And this is the first time in over 15 years that Brock Lesnar has wrestled on WWE TV. He's not wrestled a singles match or any sort of wrestling matches outside of a pay-per-view on WWE TV on either Raw or SmackDown in 15 years. So it's going to be a big occasion. I know WWE are going to be pulling out all the stops, not only this WWE Championship match, Brock versus Kofi, but so much more. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some surprise appearances or some other big matches being pulled out there to please Fox, and that's going to be a really exciting show, which will do some good ratings, I'm sure, but with Fox wanting more of a sports-based serious product instead of the silly gimmicks and sports entertainment, I think that SmackDown will be up there with NXT as the some of the better wrestling that you could possibly watch on your TV every single week. So once again, next Saturday I'll be recording 2 episodes covering AEW Dynamite with Chris and Ash, and with David Anderson we'll be looking at next week's NXT from Full Sail, including the premiere of SmackDown on Fox. So in the meantime, please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Jonas podcast for all of your weekly NXT and NXT UK updates, WWE pay-per-views, AEW updates, Dynamite of course, and the AEW pay-per-views to come, and so much more. And if you have enjoyed listening to this podcast, please don't forget to spread the word, tell your friends and tell your family, and let's get even more people listening to this podcast. Please subscribe, so with whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, hit that subscribe button so that you can be notified when a episode of Wrestling with Jonas drops. And please don't forget to vote for the Wrestling with Jonas podcast at the 2nd Annual Wrestling Podcast Awards. Just follow the link which is pinned to the top of our Facebook community page or our Twitter page, and that's Twitter is @withjonas_pod, or just go ahead and search Wrestling with Jonas to find our Wrestling with Jonas Facebook community page, and the post and the link to vote for Wrestling with Jonas at the 2nd Annual Wrestling Podcast Awards is pinned to the top of the Twitter and our Facebook pages. And we're looking to be nominated in a few categories, including Best Solo Podcast, Best Newcomer, Best Interview for our interview with Jimmy Corderas, and Best Branded. So any and all votes would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please, like I say, share this on social media, subscribe, like it, tell your friends and tell your family, and we'll speak to you and catch up with you all again next Saturday for our special 2 episodes that will be dropping Saturday afternoon. But in the meantime, have yourself a great weekend and catch up with you all again soon.